Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, a conversation with Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari on the recently passed federal budget and policy bill. Also tonight, the value of the dollar has weakened to levels unseen in half a century. And we'll hear about the dangers of hiking Arizona trails in extreme heat. Those stories and more next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Phoenix has a new police chief. He is Matt Giordano, a former department commander and current executive director of the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, which is a regulatory board. Giordano also served under former Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone. He retired as a commander with Phoenix PD after more than 20 years on the job. Today's announcement ends a months-long nationwide search for a new police chief in Phoenix. Giordano was one of 3 finalists to succeed former interim chief Michael Sullivan, who withdrew his candidacy. Other headlines: the death toll from floods in central Texas is now at 111, with at least 160 others still missing. No survivors have been found since Friday, and officials say that hopes of finding anyone still alive are growing dim. Many of those still missing did not register in area hotels or camps. Floods are among the deadliest disasters for children in the U.S. in decades, with at least 30 kids killed, many of whom were attending a summer camp for girls. President Trump today announced he's imposing a new 50% tariff on all copper imported into the U.S. The president did not make clear when that new tariff would take effect, saying only, quote, "Today we're doing copper." Of note, copper is a key component in the manufacturing of a variety of goods, including electronics, machinery, cars, all of which could be more expensive to produce with the added tariffs. Also of note, Arizona is home to the largest copper producer in the country, Freeport-McMoRan, which could see an increase in demand for domestic copper should the tariffs go through. And the U.S. Supreme Court today cleared the way for President Trump to downsize the federal workforce, at least for now. The temporary ruling overrides lower court orders that froze the cuts while they were challenged in court. The Supreme Court's order comes despite warnings that critical government services will be lost and hundreds of thousands of federal employees will lose their jobs. The case is considered a key test in terms of how far President Trump can go to reorganize the government without input from Congress. A federal budget and policy bill was signed into law by President Trump last Friday. The bill was, among other things, extending a tax cut that was set to expire. Also included cuts to Medicaid and food stamp programs for those on low incomes. Joining us now from Washington, Arizona Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari. You're back in D.C., correct, Congresswoman?
I am, but I'll be back in Phoenix tomorrow, so I'm very excited to be home.
Very good. It was good to have you back, but I want to talk to you now because we want to get you as soon as possible after the signing and the passing of this reconciliation bill. Lots to say about it. Obviously, you have had lots to say about it. What do you say about it now?
Thank you for having me, Ted. There is no way to sugarcoat it. This Trump budget bill is going to be devastating for Arizona. There are 365,000 Arizonans who rely on Medicaid, who rely on SNAP and food assistance, who are going to be impacted by this bill. This bill is also a massive job killer for Arizona. I have talked to everyone from labor union leaders, including conservative labor union leaders, electricians, construction workers, those who are building the clean energy future in Arizona, who do not understand how this could be possible. And finally, the bill raises the deficit, and it's very alarming to me to see that colleagues from the other side of the aisle who have long been financially conservative proponents and proponents of reducing the deficit that our country has just voted on a bill that will raise this country's deficit by $3.3 trillion. Finally, for Arizona, the impact is increased funding to ICE in my district in particular, but really in districts across the entire state. I've talked to small business owners, to school leaders, principals, teachers who have had their entire apparatus completely devastated. People are in fear because of the ICE raids that are happening, because families are being separated from one another, because immigrants from all backgrounds are being targeted. And this bill increases funding for the Department of Homeland Security by $175 billion. So ripping away healthcare from Arizonans just to funnel more money into family separation and detentions.
Let's start with the healthcare aspect of this. Republicans will say that they're not cutting, they are just making sure that able-bodied folks who should be working and receiving Medicaid are those that are receiving Medicaid, not, I think I've heard the quote more than once, those sitting on the couch.
Yeah, that's just not true. And as much as the Republicans, especially the ones from Arizona, want to keep repeating lies, the nonpartisan Congressional Research Office has made very clear the numbers in each district. Juan Ciscomani's district, David Schweikert's district, Eli Crane's district, Abe Hamadeh's district, all will have thousands upon thousands of constituents who will be completely thrown off of Medicaid. Then on top of that, you have the impacts on rural hospitals and community health centers that have made very clear to us that they will have to shut their doors because of the Medicaid cuts. We already are in a healthcare crisis in Arizona. We don't have enough doctors. We do not have enough access, especially for working class people in our state. And we're going to see the impacts of that as a result of this bill. So they can keep lying to people, but the impacts will be clear. This bill is the most unprecedented transfer of wealth from the working class and the poor to the bottom, or the top 1% in this country.
But again, real quickly, they say those folks still qualify. Those who qualify now will qualify then.
It's not true.
So you're saying that's just not true.
What the data shows.
Okay, because they're saying that it's just going to be more difficult to prove, and there is an argument against this, saying that it's so difficult to document all these things, document your efforts in getting a job, document all this, that, and the other, that will be so confusing, that will knock people off the rolls.
I've talked to physicians in our state. I've talked to hospital associations. I've talked to medical groups, community health center, firms in my district. All of them have sounded the alarm on this. There was an excellent op-ed recently by Dr. Vishal Verma. He's a CD1 resident and a physician who has sounded the alarm for many, many months now on this and is gathering physicians on this issue. And all of them have made very clear that not only will patients be thrown off of Medicaid, but they will likely have to shut their doors as a result.
What are you hearing from your Republican colleagues there on Capitol Hill, in the House here? I mean, you talked about the increasing the debt and how they're so against the debt, and yet the CBO says 3.3 over 10 years. That's a lot of an increase. And what are you hearing from? How are they justifying this to you, a fellow congressperson?
They, the reality is, I think there's a lot of fear of Donald Trump. He has an ironclad grip on the party, and what I have seen in my first 6 months in Congress is that my Republican colleagues are willing to do whatever it is, even if it means sacrificing their own seats in Congress, because they are so afraid of the retaliation from this administration. That is just the truth of the matter. On the final days of the negotiations last week, many of them, including Representative Ciscomani, had said that they wouldn't vote for Medicaid cuts. He wrote letters. I have met with organizations that said he assured them of this. And then they talked to the president and suddenly everything changes. There were a number of Republicans who went to the White House who, in the final hours, deals were cut, promises were made. Senator Murkowski is a great example of that. She was able to carve out some specific promises for Alaska. And that is what is happening, unfortunately, as a result of the way the president is operating. And it's really disappointing to see that Republicans are not willing to stand up for their own constituents. They're willing to sacrifice their own constituents' health and safety and prosperity and economic futures at the behest of the president, all for tax breaks for people like him and his family, and for people that donated to his campaign, billionaires who donated to his campaign and got him the presidency.
Last point on this before we get to Iran, because I want to get to the U.S. bombing of Iran, but I do want to get to the idea, and you mentioned ICE and the increased funding for immigration enforcement. Republicans will say this is what people voted them into office. They voted Donald Trump into office just for this reason, maybe more than any other. Immigration enforcement, do they have a point?
I think many people are regretting their vote on this issue. We've already seen it with a variety of immigrant communities across the country, Venezuelan Americans who didn't think that their TPS status would be affected, and now they're seeing their family members, lose that status. We're seeing that with Cuban Americans. We're seeing examples across the board and viral videos across the board of families who said they voted for Trump, but said he said he was going to go after serious criminals, right? That was he also talked about mass deportations, but I think many people really honed in on this message of going after serious criminals. The truth of the matter is that those who are being rounded up by ICE, 65% of them have no criminal record whatsoever. These are just people who have a variety of documentation statuses, many of whom have tried to come here legally through the right processes and are now being rounded up. It's also really important to note that Stephen Miller, who is advising Donald Trump on these issues, has set preposterous quotas that they want to meet, including they want to deport 3 million people per year. That means we have to expand our current ICE detention capacity 4 times over. That means private prison companies like Geo Group and CoreCivic are already making billions of dollars to detain and deport people. Yes, I believe there are some people in this country who truly want immigrants of all backgrounds deported, and it's very unfortunate. But many Americans thought that the administration was truly going to go after criminals, and that just has not been the case.
We've only got a couple of minutes left here, and I want to talk to you about the U.S. military strikes on Iran. You're an Iranian American. Your parents immigrated from Iran. Did the U.S. do the right thing in going after Iran's nuclear program?
So my perspective on this issue is looking at 2 components. First and foremost, is the president's action legal? Should he have asked for congressional authorization? And my belief, based on the Constitution, is that the president should have briefed Congress and asked for authorization before taking any sort of unilateral military action. Second, we need to understand the intelligence. We need to understand what the goal of this was. Thus far, there has been no clear response from the administration backed by intelligence to show that we have actually postponed the creation of Iran's nuclear program and any sort of advancement towards a nuclear weapon in any sort of meaningful way. So my concern, and the concern of many of my colleagues at this point, is that there is actually a high likelihood that what Donald Trump's actions have done in this case is further embolden the Islamic Republic regime, which is very different from the Iranian people. Iranian people are vehemently against their government. But what could have happened now is that the regime may be further emboldened. They could run faster towards a nuclear weapon. They are less inclined to pursue negotiations and actually come to a diplomatic solution. And that is the issue when you have a president that is conducting foreign policy via social media. I have never seen such erratic behavior over the course of 10 days. The president tweeted everything from telling a city of 10 million people in Tehran to evacuate when they obviously have nowhere to go, to threatening regime change and saying he's going to bomb the country, to calling for peace, all within 72 hours. That's not how foreign policy should ever be conducted in the United States.
Representative Yasmin Ansari, always a pleasure. Good to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us. Certainly appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Scott Wolfel. To the many thousands of you who contacted your congressperson on our behalf, I am sincerely thankful. Despite your appeals, the House voted to strip federal funding from public media. We now turn to the U.S. Senate, which represents the next opportunity to stop this clawback of funding. We're asking you to reach out to Senators Kelly and Gallego to urge them to remove the proposal to cut public media funding from the rescissions package. Visit azpbs.org/mypublicmedia to learn how you can make your voice heard.
Nezatancíme si. Din tonight.
Vais hacer historia.
Hay grasa.
Jouhukset teki hivintä.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, how the Texas community devastated by the recent floods is banding together. That's coming up at 6 on Arizona PBS.
The dollar is off to its worst start in nearly half a century. Why are we seeing a weakening dollar, and what does it mean for the economy? We asked Jose Jurado Vadillo. He's from the Seaman Research Institute, ASU's W.P. Carey School of Business. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay, so dollar's off to the worst start in like 50 years, whatever the case may be. 3-year low even. What is going on here with the dollar?
So I think there's a couple of factors at play. On the one hand, you have policy uncertainty, especially regarding trade. You have tariffs all over the place, and that puts a lot of uncertainty in the business sphere. Secondly, you have a slowing economy, which ties to the first factor. We're currently expecting 1.6% GDP growth this year. 1.4% this year and possibly 1.6% next year. So well off our 2% trajectory of growth. But I think the more important factor is the fiscal. So even before this bill was signed, the Congressional Budget Office was forecasting that by 2054, the debt to GDP ratio of the U.S. would reach 160%, clearly an unsustainable level. And this bill obviously added $3.3 trillion to our debt.
Indeed. And it sounds like global investors, especially with these GDP numbers, global investors, they're not as enamored with the U.S. economy as they used to be. Is that what's hitting the dollar here?
Partly. So the status of the dollar as a reserve currency is not currently at risk. However, international investors are certainly hedging their exposure to the U.S. dollars through financial instruments or through less holding of equity or other forms of debt.
Are they rotating out of the U.S. into Europe and other areas?
I'm sure some of them are. Sure.
Yeah, and is that something we're likely to see more of, especially with the uncertainty, as you mentioned, with tariffs and global trade?
Yes, so I would expect institutional investors and other large investors to hedge their exposure to the U.S. to some extent. I don't foresee them necessarily dumping U.S. securities at a large scale, but it only requires them to stop buying our treasury bills for the yields to rise.
You're right. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lower dollar means less purchasing power. Wouldn't that equate to more inflation?
Correct. So there's been some estimates put up by people. The current range is that 10% depreciation of the dollar will lead to around 0.3 to 0.5% increase in inflation.
Okay, but we're fighting inflation right now. We're doing our best to fight inflation. And what does that mean as far as what the Fed's going to do regarding, the interest rates?
So the market was previously pricing the likelihood of 1 or 2 rate cuts later this year. However, the Fed has made clear that they're waiting and they're going to wait and see what the inflationary consequences of the tariffs are going to be. So my guess is that the flight away from the U.S. dollar is going to decrease the range of options of the Fed and will make it less likely for them to cut rates.
I was going to say rate cuts mean, I would think a weaker dollar and rate cuts kind of go hand in hand. You don't want that. So that's not going to make the president very happy, is it? I mean, he wants to see those cuts, but the weakening dollar is not helping matters any.
That's correct. The president does want to see cuts. Part of the reason is higher yields obviously increase the cost of servicing our national debt. However, one thing that we should keep in mind is that the Federal Reserve has certain ability to influence short-term rates, but long-term rates are much harder to influence through monetary policy.
Interesting. Okay, everything we're talking about, could all of this change in the second quarter? Could all of this concern over a weakening dollar just be completely overblown with the next set of numbers coming in?
There's certainly room for market movement in either direction. However, I think some of the fundamentals that we're seeing in terms of the size of the debt and the fiscal trajectory going forward are going to be much harder to move away from.
So in terms of financial interests, U.S. exceptionalism, it's always been there. The dollar's always been there. It's the basis of everything. That is still relatively strong?
Yes, that's correct. There's a long-term movement by certain countries to diversify away from the dollar, such as China, that is conducting a lot more of their transactions in their own currency as opposed to the dollar. But the status of the dollar as a reserve currency remains strong.
Yeah, there's nowhere else to go, in other words, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, Jose Gerardo Vadillo, good information and good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's that time of year when local hiking trails become the scene of rescue operations as visitors make the mistake of going out for a hike in the midsummer heat. Joining us now is Phoenix Fire Captain Rob McDade to talk more about this, why it's happening, and what can be done to keep it from happening. Good to see you again. Thank you for joining
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ted.
All right. It starts, this big story with a family of 11 out there on South Mountain, including a child as young as 3. What was that all about?
Yeah, that was disappointing. Obviously, we have a long history of making rescues on our mountains. It's not uncommon. It's a very popular tourist attraction and for locals, but that was an extreme heat day. It was right at noon when the call went out, and the call sort of built up for us, and it was a family and one of the children was having some problems with the heat, having heat-related illnesses, so we dispatched a technical rescue team to take care of it. As we were making our way to the mountain, it kept growing. And all of a sudden, it came out 5 children with 6 adults, and that became a large operation for us.
Now, was that trail open?
That was a closed trail, restricted trails on extreme heat days, and the Holbert Trail on South Mountain was one of the closed trails that day.
Were there warning signs saying this trail is closed?
Yeah, there are numerous warning signs, and in fact, I was out there that day. Sandwich board type signs that you would have to walk around on the trail to access it from every point was on the trail.
So these are easy to see. These aren't like, hey, I didn't know what was going on out here. I had no idea the trail was closed.
No, you had to walk around these signs to get on that single track trail.
What leads to a closure? I mean, is there a certain threshold that has to be hit?
There is. So this is a long forming thing that we wanted the community's input. Parks Department, we have a Parks Board that is outside of the city government that works with the city government and the Phoenix Fire Department. And this has been in the works for years. And we finally landed on National Weather Service puts out a heat advisory. We follow them. They're the experts. When they tell us dew point is at a certain rate, the temperature is a certain rate, it's very inhospitable for any hikers. So we make the decision and we close 3 major mountains.
Okay, how common is it for a rescue operation in the middle of summer, in the middle of a hot day? I mean, closed trail or even not a closed trail, how common is this?
Unfortunately, it's a little too common for us. We get them in peak times. Our mountain rescues are year-round. We do see a peak during February when we have the waste management. We've got either a Super Bowl or a national championship or a Final Four in town. A real big influx, the car show. But then in the summer we see, unfortunately, too many of these happen. So again, we average a couple hundred of these a year. Some of them are minimal. We walk them down. Some of them we airlift them off with a helicopter, and we send our folks up there in very, very hot temperatures. And the rescuers are on those trails to get them down.
Yeah, that's no easy task for them either. This family, was anyone in this family cited for this?
So again, Parks Board is in charge, or the Parks Department would issue those citations, and then Phoenix PD would look into any endangerment. Luckily for us, I'm not obfuscating the answer.
Right.
But luckily for us, the Phoenix Fire Department, the lights go on, we hit the mountain, we focus on safety, we focus on getting them down, and we let our folks figure out who gets cited and when.
Do people ever get cited for this kind of activity?
I believe that citations have been issued, and I believe this is such a new program. I think everybody's trying to figure out when and where do we apply that. And again, like I said, luckily the Phoenix Fire Department doesn't have to make those decisions.
So for those watching right now and thinking, I think tomorrow at noon might be a great time to go hit South Mountain, what do you tell them?
Use the stairwell in your building if you work downtown. Go to the gym. It's a great time to go to the movies. We want to encourage recreation, right? And I do want to say, this family wanted to have a day out with their family. You can appreciate that. I'm glad they didn't want them at home just looking at screen time. However, let's be smart and let's be safe.
Did you get an explanation from this particular family and what they were doing, what they were thinking, or is it just let's get them out of here?
I think it was let's just get them out of the house. I think overwhelmed of 5 children, seemed like a good day to go hiking, but unfortunately it could have been very tragic.
Was it North Mountain, Camelback, and South Mountain? Are those the three?
Yep.
The big
yep.
three?
So Echo Canyon, yep, Piestewa, the main trail, and then on South Mountain we have 3 trails. The Mormon Loop, the Humboldt, and then the one that goes to the top.
Which is the one do you think you get the most summertime? We're talking summertime rescues here.
Echo Canyon at Camelback Mountain. That's our Eiffel Tower. When people come from out of town, they say, we want to go hike on Camelback Mountain. We see it on Instagram, we see it on social media. That's the mountain we want to go to.
And last question, we'll let you go. Good information. We appreciate you having here. Are these people visitors? Are these locals who really, really should know better?
We have a big mix of 80% local, 20% from out of town, so it's a lot of the local folks.
80% local. Captain Rob McDade, Phoenix Fire. All right, if you see me out there, you know I've completely lost my mind.
Right, we'll make sure you don't get on that mountain, Ted.
Sounds good. Good to have you here. Thank you. And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening. All right, thank you.